My dad called me a crazy, selfish fool for buying an old gas station on Route 66 instead of getting my sister a house. My auto shop smelled like freedom, but at home, I felt like nothing but an ATM. I'm Jack Thompson, 31, owner of Thompson's Auto Repair just outside Oklahoma City. Not the fancy part with gated communities and Teslas, but the part where real folks lived. People who knew the difference between a carburetor and a catalytic converter without having to Google it. Most days started the same. I woke up at 5 a.m., kissed Emily's forehead while she was still sleeping, and headed to the shop. Emily worked as a waitress at Rosie's Diner, one of those roadside places where truckers knew they could get decent coffee and a slice of pie that tasted like someone's grandmother made it. She dreamed of opening her own cafe someday. I kept telling her she made the best blueberry pancakes in 3 counties, but she just laughed and said dreams didn't pay bills. That's where I came in, apparently. The smell of motor oil and gasoline followed me everywhere. Emily said it was like my cologne. I didn't mind. That smell meant honest work, which was more than I could say for half the suits making 6 figures pushing paper. My hands were always stained black around the fingernails, no matter how much I scrubbed them. Emily stopped complaining years ago. When I wasn't wrenching on engines, I listened to my old Walkman. The thing was ancient, but still worked better than half the junk they make today. I had a collection of Nirvana tapes from when I was a teenager, mixed with some Frank Sinatra that reminded me of my grandpa Fred, Kurt and Frank. 2 guys who couldn't be more different, but both knew exactly who they were. I thought I was building a life. But some days, I felt like I was just funding everyone else's dreams while mine sat in the garage collecting dust. That Sunday meant family dinner at my parents' place. Emily begged off a migraine, but we both knew she just couldn't handle another evening of barely disguised manipulation. Smart woman. The moment I pulled up to the faded ranch house I grew up in, my stomach tightened. Mom's Ford Taurus with the peeling paint sat in the driveway next to Lisa's newer Honda CR-V that I helped pay for last year when her ex disappeared to Florida with his secretary. The smell hit me when I walked in. Overcooked turkey, cheap Budweiser, and Pine Sol. Mom hugged me too tight. Dad barely looked up from the football game, and Lisa was already talking about Tyler's baseball tournament before I could even take my jacket off. Jack, you're late again. Mom said, like 15 minutes mattered when I was about to hand over more of my paycheck. We sat around the scratched dining table that had been there since I was a kid. Tyler was glued to his iPad, some game with explosions and gunfire playing at full volume. No one told him to turn it down. Lisa needs a new couch, Jack. That old one is falling apart, Dad mumbled between bites of dry turkey. I took a long swig of Budweiser. I just sent money for the roof repair last month. Lisa jumped in. Tyler needs a new iPhone. All his friends have one, and he's getting bullied for his old model. You don't want him to be a loser, do you? I looked at my 10-year-old nephew, completely oblivious to the conversation. Killing digital zombies on a tablet that cost more than my first car. When I was his age, I got Dad's hand-me-down jeans and was grateful. I'll see what I can do, I said, the same answer I always gave. Lisa smiled, mission accomplished. Driving home, I remember when I was 18 and finally left. Dad had spent my college fund on a boat he used twice before selling it at a loss. Mom cried and said I was selfish for wanting to leave. I slept in my car for 3 months while working 2 jobs and saving for a deposit on an apartment. Never complained once. Meanwhile, Lisa got a fully paid community college education and a down payment on her first house as a wedding gift. The house she promptly lost in the divorce because her ex's name was the only one on the mortgage. Somehow that was my fault too. And now, every month, $1,500 of my hard-earned money went to them. Not because they needed it, but because they'd always expected it. Instead of going home, I drove to Grandpa Fred's place on the outskirts of town. His mailbox was tilted to one side, and the American flag on his porch had faded almost white in places. But the old Ford F-100 pickup in the driveway still shined like it was 1965. Fred opened the door before I knocked. At 85, he was still tall and straight-backed, though his flannel shirt hung loose on his frame now. "About time you showed up, boy," he said, but his eyes were smiling. "Got Coca-Cola in glass bottles. None of that plastic garbage." Inside, his record player was spinning Elvis Presley, and the walls were lined with black and white photos of Route 66 in its glory days. Fred was a mechanic who worked at a gas station along the Mother Road when it was the main artery pumping life through America's heartland. He handed me an ice-cold Coke and settled into his worn leather recliner. The sweetness tasted different from a glass bottle. That wasn't nostalgia talking. That was fact. "How's the family bleeding you dry this month?" he asked, because Fred had never wasted time with small talk. I told him about the couch and the iPhone, and he shook his head. "Your daddy never did understand the difference between wanting and needing." Fred told me stories about Route 66 while we drank our Cokes. How he met my grandmother at a roadside cafe where she served cherry pie to travelers heading west. How he fixed motorcycle for guys who thought they were James Dean, and cars for families chasing the California dream. "Your grandma could make a cup of coffee and a kind word feel like the greatest luxury on earth," he said, his voice softening. "We didn't have much, but folks remembered us. That meant something back then." The stories washed over me like a cleansing rain after the toxic family dinner. Fred never asked me for a dime. Never had. "Got something to show you," Fred said suddenly. Standing up, "Let's take the old girl for a spin." We climbed into his meticulously maintained Ford F-100. The engine purred like a big cat, and the bench seat had that worn leather smell that no air freshener could replicate. Fred drove us out of town, past fields and farmhouses, until we turned onto what used to be part of the old Route 66. "Not many remember this stretch anymore," he said as we pulled up to an abandoned gas station. The sign was rusted, the windows cracked, weeds growing through the concrete. But Fred looked at it like it was a palace. This was it, Jackie boy, heart and soul of Route 66 right here. We got out, and Fred walked around the property with surprising energy. He pointed to where the pumps used to be, the garage where he fixed cars, the little cafe area where Grandma served food. Travelers from all over the country stopped here. This wasn't just a gas station. It was a place where stories crossed paths. Inside, dust covered everything, but I could see the bones of what used to be. An old soda machine sat dead in the corner. The counter where my grandmother must have stood was still there, though the surface was warped with age and water damage. Fred pulled out his wallet and showed me a faded photograph I'd never seen before. Him and my grandmother, young and beautiful, dancing by an old jukebox that used to stand in the corner, her dress swirling, his face so full of life it barely resembled the weathered man beside me. "Look at you, Gramps," I said, grinning. "You were cooler than Kurt Cobain in his prime." Fred laughed, a sound like rustling leaves. "And you, little Jack, you're going to surprise everyone someday, including yourself." I tried to turn on the ancient soda machine, expecting nothing. It made a groaning noise that echoed through the empty building. "Grandpa, this isn't Starbucks. This thing sounds like a dying tractor." Fred patted the machine affectionately. "Tractors built America. Boy, nothing wrong with sounding like one." He walked to the big windows at the front, wiping dust away with his sleeve to look out at the empty road. "Life is like Route 66, Jack. Not always smooth, but every turn is worth it if you drive with your heart." Fred put his hand on my shoulder, and the weight felt different from the burden my family placed on me. It felt like strength being passed down. "This gas station isn't just rust and memories, Jack. This was life. Real life. Don't lose sight of that." I felt warmth spreading through me, the kind I never felt sitting at my parents' dinner table. Fred saw me, not what I could give him, not what I should be, just me. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the abandoned lot, I didn't want to leave. There, with those ghosts of a better time, I felt more home than in the life I'd built. Why did it close down? I asked as we finally headed back to the truck. Interstate came through in the 70s. Bypassed all this. Progress, they called it. Fred spat on the ground. Progress means a lot of good things get left behind. On the drive back, I noticed how Fred's hands, spotted with age but still strong, gripped the wheel like he was holding on to something precious. Maybe he was. At his house, he made us grilled cheese sandwiches that tasted better than any fancy restaurant meal I'd ever had. We ate them while watching an old Western he'd seen 100 times, but still laughed at all the same parts. You know, Jack, he said during a commercial, your grandma used to say you reminded her of me. Stubborn as a mule, but with a good heart. It was the nicest thing anyone had said to me in years. When I finally headed home, Fred pressed a photograph of him and Grandma into my hand. You keep this. Remember what matters. I tucked it carefully into my wallet, promised to visit again soon, and drove home with Elvis playing in my head. That was 3 days ago. I'd meant to go back, but work got busy with a fleet of delivery trucks needing urgent maintenance. Every night, I looked at that photograph before bed, planning to call Fred the next day. And every day, something came up. Friday night, I was relaxing at home after a long week. Emily was working the late shift at the diner. I sat in the darkness of our living room, the TV on mute, thinking about gas stations in Route 66 and what it meant to build something that mattered. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Mr. Thompson? This is Memorial Hospital. We're calling about your grandfather, Fred Thompson. He's been admitted after suffering a heart attack. The room spun. My throat closed up. The photograph burned in my pocket. Is he? I couldn't finish the question. He's in critical condition. The doctor suggests you come quickly. As I grabbed my keys, already halfway out the door, one thought hammered in my head like a broken piston. Why didn't I visit more often? The hospital corridors smelled like industrial cleaner and false hope. I sprinted through them, my work boots squeaking against the polished floor, still wearing my grease-stained jeans from the shop. A nurse with tired eyes pointed me toward the ICU, without me having to ask. Fred looked small in the hospital bed, tubes and wires connecting him to machines that beeped and hummed. His skin was the color of old newspaper, his breathing shallow. But when he saw me, his eyes lit up for a second. Jackie boy, he whispered. His voice was sandpaper on rust. I took his hand, rough from decades of manual labor, and felt how cold it was. The calluses that had built America, one engine at a time, were still there. I'm here, Grandpa. The monitor next to his bed kept irregular time with his heartbeat. A nurse came in, adjusted something, glanced at me with that particular expression medical staff have when they know something you don't want to hear. You teach that kid of yours to change oil yet? Fred asked, his words slurring slightly. I don't have kids, Grandpa. That's Tyler, Lisa's boy. He frowned, confused. Right. Your sister's kid. The spoiled one. Even dying, Fred had his priorities straight. We sat in silence for a while, the machines doing all the talking. I remember being 9 years old, standing on a milk crate in Fred's garage while he taught me how to rebuild a carburetor. Mom had been furious when I came home covered in grease, but Fred just laughed and told her, "The boy's learning something useful, Helen. Let him be." Do you remember that Chevy Impala we fixed up when I was in high school? I asked him. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. 1967. Turquoise. She purred like a kitten when we were done. Fred's breathing became more labored. His fingers tightened around mine. Keep the memories, Jack, he whispered. They're who we are. I felt my throat close up. You've been my hero since I was a kid, Grandpa. His eyes fixed on mine. Your grandma, she always said you were the best of us. Fred closed his eyes, and for a terrifying moment, I thought he was gone. But the monitors kept beeping, and his chest still rose and fell, barely. I pulled out the photograph he'd given me, him and Grandma dancing by Route 66. I placed it in his hand. You were the only one who ever saw me, I told him, not sure if he could hear. Not what I could do for you. Just me. The night nurse came in and checked his vitals. You should get some rest, she said. We'll call if anything changes. I shook my head. I'm staying. That night, I slept in a vinyl chair next to Fred's bed, holding his hand. At 4:17 a.m., the machines went crazy, and then medical staff flooded the room, pushing me into the hallway. I already knew. Fred had taken his final drive down Route 66. The funeral was small, a handful of Fred's old friends, my parents, Lisa and Tyler, Emily and me. My father stood stiffly in a suit he'd last worn to Lisa's wedding, checking his watch every few minutes. Mom dabbed at dry eyes with a tissue. Lisa kept Tyler distracted with his phone. I stood alone by the casket, looking at Fred's peaceful face. He was wearing his favorite flannel shirt under his suit jacket. I'd insisted on that. A small American flag was pinned to his lapel. "See you down the road, Grandpa," I whispered, placing the Route 66 photo in the casket. It felt right that he and Grandma would be together again. A week later, I sat in the office of Fred's lawyer, a man named Harkins with wire-rimmed glasses and a bow tie. Emily squeezed my hand as he read the will. "To my grandson, Jack Thompson, I leave the sum of $50,000, my record collection, including my Elvis records and my vintage record player. May the music remind you that life should have a soundtrack." I swallowed hard. Fred's records were priceless to me, worth far more than the money. "To my granddaughter, Lisa Thompson Walker, I leave the sum of $50,000. Lisa, sitting across from me, immediately started mental shopping. I could practically see the dollar signs in her eyes. Harkins continued, "I also leave my 1965 Ford F-100 pickup truck to Jack, who will appreciate its soul. Everything else is to be liquidated and divided equally between Jack and Lisa." Fred didn't have much else. His house and its contents would maybe bring another $20,000 each after the bank took its share. Lisa cornered me in the parking lot afterward. "What are you going to do with your money?" she asked, already scrolling through her phone at SUV listings. "I don't know yet," I told her honestly. 3 days later, she pulled up to my house in a brand new Jeep Grand Cherokee, honking until I came outside. "What do you think?" she grinned, running her hand along the shiny black paint. "Tyler needs to roll in style. You should see how proud he is when I pick him up from school now." I thought about how Fred had kept his truck running for over 50 years, replacing parts himself, treating it with respect. Grandpa would have hated it, I said before I could stop myself. Lisa's face hardened. "Well, Grandpa's not here, is he? Some of us have to live in the real world, Jack." That night, I got a call from Mr. Cole, an old friend of Fred's who came to the funeral. He owned the abandoned gas station Fred had shown me. "Jack, I've been thinking about selling that old place on Route 66, he said without preamble. "Walmart wants the land for a parking lot extension. Offer me good money, too." My heart sank. Another piece of history bulldozed for progress. "But I remembered how Fred always talked about you," Cole continued. "How you understood what places like that meant. So I'm offering it to you first. $250,000 for the whole property. Gas station, diner, motel, and the 2 acres it sits on." I nearly dropped the phone. $250,000 was 5 times what Fred had left me. "I don't have that kind of money, Mr. Cole. I'd take payments, for Fred's sake, but I can't wait forever. Walmart's chomping at the bit." After we hung up, I sat in the dark, thinking. The only way I could afford it would be to sell my auto shop and our house. Everything I had worked for since I was 18. Pure insanity. But I couldn't stop thinking about Fred's words. This was life. Real life. When Emily came home from her late shift, I told her about Cole's offer. "You can't be serious," she said, still wearing her diner uniform, the smell of French fries in her hair. "That place is falling apart. We've been saving for our own cafe, Jack. A real business, not some rotting gas station. It's part of history." I tried to explain. It meant something to Fred, and now it means something to me. Emily's eyes narrowed. "This is grief talking. You're not thinking straight." Maybe I'm finally thinking straight for the first time. The fight escalated. Emily called her parents, who came over the next evening for an intervention. Her father, a bank manager who'd always treated me like I was slightly stupid for working with my hands, sat at our kitchen table looking grave. "Jack, be a man, not a dreamer," he said. "Emily needs stability. This gas station fantasy is childish." I looked at Emily, silently pleading for her to understand. "This isn't a fantasy. It's who I am." She shook her head, tears in her eyes. "I can't do this, Jack. I can't start over in some decrepit motel with no future. The next morning, she was gone. A note on the kitchen counter. I need stability. I'm sorry. 5 years together ended just like that. I should have felt devastated, but all I felt was a strange, calm clarity. Fred would have understood. I called Mr. Cole and told him I wanted the gas station. Then I contacted a commercial realtor about selling my auto shop. The final step was telling my family. I drove over to my parent house on Sunday evening, knowing Lisa and Tyler would be there for their weekly dinner. Mom was pulling a casserole from the oven when I arrived, the smell of cheap cheese and canned soup filling the kitchen. Dad was in his usual spot on the couch, beer in hand. When everyone was settled around the dining table, picking at their food, I cleared my throat. I've decided to sell the auto shop. Dad put down his beer. What? Why would you do something so stupid? I took a deep breath. I'm buying the old gas station on Route 66 that Grandpa Fred used to work at. The silence was like the moment before a tornado hits. Then all hell broke loose. You selfish idiot. Dad shouted, your sister needs a house. You have responsibilities. Mom started crying. After everything we've done for you. Lisa was the worst. You're wasting Grandpa's money on a rotting building? Tyler needs braces, and I've got bills. I stood up slowly. I've been sending you money for years. All three of you. I'm done being your ATM. Dad's face turned purple. You ungrateful little, you're no son of mine. I walked out, their shouts following me to the car. As I drove away, I felt something breaking inside me, but also something stronger taking its place. That night, in my empty house, Emily had taken most of the furniture. I put Fred's record player on the floor and played Blue Suede Shoes. The scratchy vinyl filled the barren rooms with Elvis's voice. Grandpa, I'm not giving up, I said to the empty house. I don't care what they say. Over the next 2 weeks, everything moved quickly. My auto shop sold for $180,000, less than I'd hoped, but enough. The house went for another $120,000. I signed the papers for the gas station property, feeling a mixture of terror and exhilaration. The night I got the keys, rain was coming down in sheets. The realtor handed them over with a look of pity, like he was watching a man throw his life away. Good luck, he said, not meaning it. Hope whatever you're looking for is worth it. I drove Fred's old pickup to property, rain hammering on the roof, wipers barely keeping up. The truck's headlights caught the rusted sign, Route 66 Gas and Dine. I parked and sat there for a long time, listening to the rain and wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. Congratulations, Jack, I muttered to myself. You just bought the most expensive pile of rust in Oklahoma, and the Oscar for stupidity goes to... I pulled Fred's record from its sleeve. Not Elvis this time, but a Bill Withers album Fred used to play when teaching me to change spark plugs. Lean on Me, Fred's philosophy in musical form. Clutching the record and the keys, I finally stepped out into the rain. Cold water soaked through my jacket as I walked to the dilapidated building. The keys stuck in the lock, requiring a jiggle and a firm shoulder against the warped door before it finally gave way. Inside, the darkness was absolute. I used my phone flashlight to navigate around fallen ceiling tiles and debris. Rain dripped through holes in the roof, creating tiny percussion instruments from tin cans and old buckets someone had placed to catch the leaks. I remembered Fred's words, sometimes you have to burn to be reborn. I hoped he was right, because I just burned my entire life to ground. Standing in what used to be the diner section, I could almost hear the ghosts of travelers from decades past. Truckers laughing over coffee, families excited about their cross-country adventures, young lovers sharing a milkshake with 2 straws. I walked through to the motel section, a row of 6 rooms behind the main building. The flashlight beam revealed peeling wallpaper, musty mattresses, and a raccoon that hissed at me before scampering through a hole in the wall. Great. Roommates already, I said to the empty air. Walking back outside, I stood in the rain looking up at the enormous sky above Route 66. Stars peeked through breaks in clouds, ancient light reaching down to this forgotten corner of Oklahoma. Fred's record was getting soaked in my hands, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Grandpa, if you can hear me, I whispered. Tell me I'm not crazy. Only the rain answered. But as I stood there, cold water running down my neck, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Real, terrifying freedom. I had no job, no girlfriend, no family support. I'd alienated everyone who claimed to love me. I was standing in front of a decaying gas station that was now eating up all my savings and Grandpa's inheritance. And yet, for the first time since I was a kid walking into Fred's garage, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. That first night in the abandoned motel room was something straight out of a horror movie. The mattress I dragged and smelled like mothballs and broken dreams. Rain leaked through the ceiling in 3 different spots. I'd set up buckets I found in the maintenance closet, and their rhythmic dripping kept time with my racing thoughts. By morning, the rain had stopped, but my doubts hadn't. I sat on the edge of that musty mattress eating cold Spam from the can, wondering what the hell I'd got myself into. The only furniture was a wobbly table I'd found in the diner, and a lawn chair someone had abandoned years ago. Fred's record player sat on an upturned milk crate, Elvis Presley providing the only warmth in the damp room. No electricity yet, just a battery-powered lamp and the player running on its last juice. Outside, Route 66 stretched empty in both directions, an artery without blood. I had exactly $71,203 left after buying property. Sounded like a lot until I started calculating what it would take to renovate. New roof alone would be $30,000. Plumbing, electrical, kitchen equipment, furniture. The list grew faster than my remaining funds could handle. That morning, I started with what I could do myself. Cleaning, hauling trash, scrubbing decades of grime from windows to let some light in. My hands blistered, then calloused. My back screamed. But each night, looking at what I'd accomplished, I felt a satisfaction deeper than any paycheck had ever given me. 2 weeks in, I was trying to fix the ancient soda machine Fred had loved so much. The thing was built like a Cold War bunker, solid metal that had survived decades of neglect. I'd taken it apart completely, cleaning each component, replacing what I could with parts ordered online. On a whim, I propped up my phone and recorded myself working on it. Day 14 at the abandoned Route 66 gas station. I narrated, grease up to my elbows. I've lost my family, my girlfriend, and probably my mind. But this old soda machine might just save me. Like if you think I'm not completely crazy. I posted it to TikTok before going to sleep, mostly as a joke. By morning, it had 50,000 views. By lunchtime, 500,000. By dinner, 1 million. The comments section exploded. My grandpa used to stop at this exact place in the 60s. Route 66 Restoration Project. I'm all in. This is the America we're losing. Thank you for saving it. That soda machine is older than my parents and cooler than both of them. And then there was one comment that stopped me cold. You still smell like gasoline? Emily's username. I didn't respond. Wasn't ready for that conversation yet. Instead, I made another video showing the diner area and my dreams for restoring it to its 1960s glory. That one hit 2 million views. People started sending things. An elderly woman in Arizona mailed me a yellowed menu from the diner circa 1962. Burgers for 35 cents. Coffee for a dime. A man in his 80s emailed photos of himself as a teenager standing by the gas pumps, his first car gleaming with pride. Then the donations started coming in. $20 here. 50 there. 100. Someone commented, "You should start a GoFundMe for this." I'd chip in. I hesitated. Taking money from strangers felt wrong somehow. But after a night sleeping to the sound of rain dripping into buckets, my pride took a back seat to pragmatism. I set up the page, asking for $25,000 to fix the roof. We hit that goal in 6 hours. By the 3-day mark, the campaign had raised $102,458. I sat on the motel steps, staring at my phone in disbelief. The comments kept coming. My parents got engaged at that motel in 1965. I drove Route 66 with my dad before he died. This matters. America needs places with soul, not more Walmarts. With the money came responsibility. I posted daily updates, showing every penny spent, hired local contractors, a roofing crew, an electrician who remembered the place from his childhood, a plumber who brought his apprentice son along to see something built to last. The first time the lights came on throughout the building, I nearly cried. When the water ran clear and hot, I definitely did. Small victories, but they felt monumental. I moved into one of the motel rooms permanently, the one farthest in the road with a view of the sunrise over the fields behind the property. Bought a rail bed, got a mini fridge and a microwave, almost civilized. The most incredible discovery came while cleaning out the motel's old reception desk. Tucked in a drawer was a guest book, its pages yellow and brittle, names and dates going back to 1957. Messages to John and Kate, 1964. Got engaged here tonight. Thompson family, California or bust. Kids love the pie. Frank and Sally, honeymoon night number 3. The stars here are magic. Bill S., on my way to Vietnam. Hope to see this place again someday. I wondered if Bill ever made it back. If John and Kate stayed married. If the Thompson kids remembered that pie. This wasn't just a gas station. It was a waypoint in countless lives. My TikTok following grew to over 1 million people. I started getting recognized in town, which was weird as hell. The hardware store owner who used to barely grunt at me now wanted selfies. Local news did a story, then a regional travel channel. One morning, a production crew from a reality show about renovations showed up unannounced. I sent them packing. This wasn't about TV fame. This was about keeping a promise to Fred. Each night, I played one of his records, updating him on the progress like he was sitting right there in that lawn chair, sipping Coca-Cola from the glass bottle. The soda machine finally surrendered to my determination, humming to life after I replaced a compressor and rewired the whole system. The sound it made reminded me of an old tractor warming up on a winter morning. Not smooth, not quiet, but honest. I filmed myself pressing the button for the first test. Ice-cold Coca-Cola in a glass bottle slid down the chute, perfectly chilled. I held up to the camera, grinning like I just struck oil. Grandpa Fred used to say tractors built America. I told my audience, this old machine sounds like one, and I wouldn't have it any other way. That video hit 10 million views. 3 months in, the roof was fixed, the electrical and plumbing updated, and the diner area was taking shape. I'd found original-style red vinyl booths from a restaurant that was closing in Tulsa, installed a vintage jukebox that actually worked, loaded with Elvis, Beach Boys, and all the hits from the 50s and 60s. The gas pumps were next, not functional, but restored to their retro glory. I wanted drivers to pull in even if they didn't need fuel, just to feel like they'd traveled back in time. One evening, while trying to get the ancient refrigerator in the diner kitchen running, it made a sound like a dying whale. This thing is groaning like it's auditioning for a role in Transformers, I muttered, filming the process of my now daily updates. Comments poured with advice from vintage appliance enthusiasts, retired repairmen, and random people who just enjoyed watching me suffer through the restoration. One comment caught my eye. Mabel's Diner in Springfield still has that exact model running. Talked to Joe the cook. I actually drove the 3 hours to Springfield the next day. Joe, a 70-year-old with forearms like Popeye and a vocabulary that would make a sailor blush, showed me every trick to keeping that refrigerator model alive. By the time I left, I had a new friend and the knowledge to resurrect my own kitchen dinosaur. The menu planning was next. I wanted food that honored the original diner, but wouldn't disappoint modern palates. Classic burgers and malts, for sure, but also vegetarian options and locally sourced ingredients when possible. The balance between nostalgia and reality was tricky. I hired a local chef who'd recently lost his job when a chain restaurant bought out the family place he'd worked at for 20 years. Malcolm was in his 50s, with a gray ponytail and strong opinions about proper pie crust. We spent evenings experimenting in the newly renovated kitchen, arguing about whether adding rosemary to the fries was sacrilege or genius. The motel rooms were my favorite transformation. Each of the 6 rooms got a theme based on a decade of Route 60 LXS history. The 1950s room had a black and white TV, actually a modern flat screen in disguise, and vintage car advertisements framed on the walls. The 1960s room featured psychedelic colors and a record player, and so on through the decades. I found local artists to paint murals on each door, showing scenes from that room's era. The detail work took months, but the results were magical. The first time I walked a row of finished rooms, I felt Fred's presence so strongly I half expected to see him leaning against the wall, nodding approval. "Dreams keep you going at night," Fred used to tell me, "but memories keep you going during the day." I finally understood what he meant. This place was built on both dreams of what it could be again and memories of what it had once been. The combination was more powerful than either alone. The financial reality remained challenging. Even with the GoFundMe money, I was running on fumes by the 6-month mark. I'd poured every cent into the renovation, leaving barely enough for ramen noodles and coffee. But then, something unexpected happened. A production company contacted me about using the gas station for a scene in a movie about Route 66. The location fee they offered would cover my expenses for another 2 months. After them, a vintage car club asked to hold their annual gathering in my parking lot. Then a travel magazine wanted to do a feature. Suddenly, I had income without even being open for business yet. People were paying to be part of the resurrection story. One night, scrolling through donation notifications, I spotted it, $500 from Anonymous with a note for the best cup of coffee on Route 66. No name, but I knew. Emily had always said she'd serve the best coffee when we opened our cafe. I didn't reach out. Wasn't sure what to say yet. But I took that $500 and bought the finest commercial coffee machine I could find. The grand opening date was set for June 15th, exactly 1 year after I'd gotten the keys. I named the place the Memory Stop, with a neon sign designed to look like it had been there since 1957. Below the main sign, smaller letters read, "In memory of Fred Thompson, who knew what mattered." The week before opening, I was a mess of anxiety and excitement. Inspections, permits, hiring staff, training, stocking supplies. My TikTok updates became less frequent as the real work intensified. The night before the grand opening, I stood outside looking at the finished place. The neon sign glowed against the darkening sky, casting a warm red and blue light across the freshly paved parking lot. The gas pumps stood at attention, restored to their vintage glory. The diner windows gleamed, red vinyl booths visible inside. The motel doors, each with its unique decade mural, lined up like colorful soldiers. From abandoned rust bucket to gleaming time capsule in 1 year. I pulled out my phone for one final pre-opening TikTok update. As I was recording my thoughts, headlights appeared on Route 66, slowing as they approached. A familiar car pulled into the lot, parking under the glow of the neon. Emily stepped out, looking both nervous and determined. Her hair was shorter than I remembered, but she still moved with that same grace that caught my 5 years ago at Rosie's Diner. She walked toward me, stopping a few feet away. The neon reflected in her eyes as she looked around at what I'd built. "I've missed your stupid jokes, Jack," she finally said, a small smile playing at the corner of her mouth. I couldn't help but smile back. Grand opening's tomorrow. Staying for it. Emily stayed the night before the grand opening. We sat outside on the steps of room number 3, the 1960s themed one with a lava lamp and Beatles posters. The stars above Route 66 seemed especially bright that night as she finally told me why she'd come back. "I'm sorry, Jack," she said, her voice catching. "I was so wrong to leave. These past months have been miserable without you." She explained how she followed my journey through TikTok, watching every video multiple times. How she'd started questioning her decision almost immediately. How her parents had been furious when she told them she was quitting her steady job at the diner to come find me. "My dad said I was throwing my life away for a dreamer," she said with a small laugh. Sound familiar? When she told them she was leaving anyway, they'd cut her off. No more safety net. No more practical advice. She'd packed her car and driven straight here, not even sure if I'd want to see her. "I don't care what happens now," she whispered. "I just want to be with you through whatever comes next, the good and the bad." Morning came too soon. I'd hired 10 local staff, 4 for the diner, 2 for the gas station shop, and 4 for the motel. All of them arrived early, excited and nervous. Most wore the vintage-style uniforms I'd found online. The waitresses in blue dresses with white aprons, the gas attendants in pressed shirts with bow ties. It looked like a movie set, but one where you could actually eat the food and sleep in the beds. The Everly Brothers played through the speakers as we made final preparations. Malcolm, my chef, was barking orders in the kitchen like a drill sergeant with a spatula. The smell of fresh coffee and his special apple pie filled the air. We'd scheduled the opening for 10 a.m. By 8:30, cars were already lining up on both sides of Route 66. My TikTok followers had shown up in force, some driving hundreds of miles to be part of the day. Local families came too, curious about the place that had been generating buzz for months. Emily stood beside me at the front door, wearing one of the vintage waitress uniforms. When I raised an eyebrow, she squeezed my hand. We're in this together now, remember? For better or worse. At exactly 10 a.m., I cut the ribbon stretched across the entrance with giant novelty scissors borrowed from a chamber of commerce. The crowd cheered like I just won the Super Bowl. "Welcome to the memory stop," I said, my voice catching. "Welcome back to the 1960s. People flooded in, exclaiming over every detail. The jukebox immediately got fed with quarters. The soda fountain had a line 10 people deep. Every booth in the diner filled within minutes. Malcolm's burgers, made from a 1962 recipe but with locally sourced beef, were a hit. His pie disappeared so fast we had to start rationing slices. Outside, people took photos by the vintage gas pumps. We weren't actually selling gas. The permits and environmental requirements were a nightmare, but I'd restored them to working condition as museum pieces. Kids pretended to fill up their parents' cars while wearing the little paper attendant hats we gave out as souvenirs. The motel had been fully booked for months. 6 rooms wasn't much, but each guest got a Polaroid picture taken in front of their decade-themed door to take home. The waiting list for future stays stretched into next year. But it wasn't the commercial success that got me. It was the stories. An elderly couple approached me as I was refilling the napkin dispensers. The man had to be in his 80s. His wife about the same, both dressed like they were going to church. "Young man," he said, his voice wavering, "my wife and I danced right over there in 1968. He pointed to the space in front of the jukebox. It was our 3rd date. I proposed to her later that night. His wife smiled, tears in her eyes. We'd been married 54 years this August. I watched as they made their way to the jukebox, put in a quarter, and selected a song I didn't recognize. When it played, they held each other and swayed gently, oblivious to the crowd, lost in their own memory. People around them stopped eating to watch. Phones forgotten for once. That was just the beginning. A woman in her 50s showed me a photo of her father standing by one of the gas pumps in a military uniform. He shipped out to Vietnam the next day, she told me. He always talked about this place. He didn't make it back, but I know he'd be happy to see it alive again. A teenage girl spent 20 minutes taking selfies by the neon sign. When I walked past, she grabbed my arm. "This is so much cooler than Instagram filters," she exclaimed. "It's like actually real, you know?" I did know. That was the whole point. By mid-afternoon, we had a line stretching down the highway. The local police had to direct traffic. Emily moved like a dream between tables, remembering names, taking orders, treating each guest like they were the most important person there. Watching her, I remembered why I'd fallen for her in the first place, and why I'd been so quick to forgive her. Some connections just can't be broken. The diner had to close briefly at 4 p.m. just to restock. Malcolm was sweating through his chef's coat, but grinning ear to ear. "Jack, we're out of everything but attitude," he announced. "I've never cooked so many burgers in my life." We reopened at 5 p.m. and stayed busy until midnight. The last customers finally left around 1 a.m., but only because we practically pushed them out the door. After everyone was gone, the staff and I collapsed in the diner booths, exhausted but riding high on adrenaline and success. I'd laid in a case of champagne, hoping we'd have something to celebrate. We did. To the memory stop, I toasted, raising my glass. And to Fred, who knew what mattered, Emily raised her glass and added softly, and to second chances. Our eyes met over the rims of our champagne flutes, and in that moment, I knew we were going to be okay. Better than okay. The success of opening day wasn't a fluke. The crowds kept coming day after day. We had to hire more staff, extend our hours, and finally implement a reservation system for the diner after a minor riot almost broke out over the last slice of Malcolm's banana cream pie. 2 weeks in, a local TV crew showed up to do a story. The reporter, a woman with hair stiff enough to withstand a tornado, kept referring to me as the TikTok sensation who revived Route 66. The story made the state news, then got picked up by a national travel show. Suddenly I was doing interviews with magazines and podcasts. A production company wanted to feature the memory stop in a documentary about American roadside attractions. Tour buses added us as a regular stop. Emily and I worked side by side through it all. The long days blended into longer nights, but we hardly noticed the exhaustion. We'd found our rhythm, working together as if we'd been doing it for years. She took over managing the diner, while I handled the motel and promotions. At night, we'd collapse in a bed in the little room behind the office, too tired to do much more than hold each other before sleep took us. For months after opening, we had our first official financial review. The numbers were staggering. At the current rate, we'd make over $1.2 million in the first year. After expenses, that was still a healthy profit. We should get a real place to live, Emily said one night as we looked over books. Something small with a view of the highway. I love this place, but I'd like a little separation between home and work. I nodded, understanding completely. As magical as a memory stop was, living where you worked had its challenges. Tourists were constantly trying to peek into our private space, and the lack of separation made it hard to ever truly relax. A month later, we found a little craftsman-style house just a mile down Route 66. It needed work. What didn't? But it had good bones and a front porch perfect for watching sunsets. We moved in together, turning one of the spare bedrooms into a shrine for Fred's record collection and memorabilia. The first night in our new home, Emily opened a bottle of wine and curled up next to me on our second-hand couch. "Remember when my parents said you were just a dreamer?" she asked. "That I needed stability?" I nodded. The memory's still a little painful. "This feels more stable than anything I've ever had," she said, gesturing around us. "Because we built it together." The memory stop became more than just a business. It turned into a community hub. We hosted classic car meetups, swing dance nights, and outdoor movie screening projected onto the side of the motel. Local kids came by after school for malts and free Wi-Fi. Travelers planning Route 66 road trips made it a mandatory stop. Malcolm expanded the menu, but always within the boundaries of what might have existed in the diner's heyday. When a tourist in designer sunglasses asked for a vegan burger, Malcolm emerged from the kitchen, spatula in hand. "Sir," he said with deadly seriousness, "in the 1960s, the only vegans were cows." The man looked shocked, then burst out laughing. He ordered the house special instead. Emily started her coffee program, sourcing beans from small American roasters and brewing them in ways that honored both tradition and modern tastes. Her coffee became so popular that we added a small roastery in what used to be the gas station's garage. The Memory Stop blend sold out every week, with orders coming in from all 50 states. "Looks like we both got our dreams," she told me one morning as we watched the sunrise from our porch. "Your gas station and my cafe, all rolled into one." On quiet mornings before opening, I'd sometimes sit alone in Fred's restored pickup in the parking lot, just taking it all in: the neon sign, the vintage gas pumps, the carefully maintained aesthetic that transported visitors back to a simpler time. Fred used to say, "Don't be afraid of falling. Be afraid of not trying." I had tried, and somehow it had worked. 9 months after opening, a film crew from a major streaming service arrived to shoot part of a documentary series about American highways. They spent 3 days filming every corner of the Memory Stop, interviewing me, Emily, Malcolm, and dozens of customers. The director, a woman with intense eyes and a New York accent, grabbed my arm on their last day. "What you've done here is important," she said. "You've saved more than a building. You preserved a feeling. That's rare." When the series aired 2 months later, our website crashed from the traffic. The motel was booked solid for the next 18 months. Emily and I had to implement a lottery system for reservations. One evening, after a particularly busy day, Emily found me in the diner after closing. The place was empty, chairs up on tables, but the jukebox still played softly in the corner. "Surfing USA" by the Beach Boys. She had something behind her back. "Remember how this all started?" she asked, pulling out one of Fred's records, the Bill Withers album I brought with me the night I got the keys. She put it on the portable record player we kept behind the counter. As "Lean on Me" filled the empty diner, she held out her hand. We danced between the tables, the moon shining through the windows, casting long shadows across the checkered floor. "You did good, Jack," she whispered. Fred would be proud. I thought about how much had changed in a year, how I'd lost everything that had seemed important, my business, my house, my family's approval, and how I gained something that couldn't be measured in dollars. Route 66 saved me as much as I saved it. I told her, "And you saved me by coming back." She smiled, resting her head on my shoulder as we swayed to the music. I was always coming back. I just needed time to realize where I belonged. We closed the diner at 10 p.m. every night. But that evening, around 9:45, the bell above the door jingled. I looked up, ready to tell the newcomers we were about to close. The words died in my throat. Lisa stood in the doorway, my 10-year-old nephew Tyler beside her. He wore a Marvel T-shirt and looked around the diner with wide-eyed wonder. Lisa looked thin, tired, and deeply uncomfortable. Tyler spotted me first. "Uncle Jack!" he yelled, running across the diner and crashing into me with a hug that nearly knocked me over. "This place is awesome. Is that a real jukebox? Can I play it? Do you have any video games? Can I stay in the motel?" I laughed, ruffling his hair. "Slow down, buddy. One question at a time." Over his head, I met Lisa's eyes. She looked down, then forced herself to look back up. "Jack, we need to talk," she said quietly. Emily appeared from the kitchen, sensing the tension. "I'll show Tyler how the jukebox works," she offered, giving me a supportive nod. As Emily led my excited nephew away, Lisa and I stood awkwardly by the door. I hadn't spoken to her or my parents since that disastrous dinner nearly a year ago. No calls, no texts, nothing. It was like I'd been erased from the family. Now here she was, in my diner, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. "I saw you on TV," she finally said. "That documentary. The whole town's talking about you." I waited, not making it easier for her. "Tyler's been begging to come here for months. Ever since he saw your TikTok videos. He thinks you're some kind of celebrity." I glanced over at my nephew, who was happily feeding quarters into jukebox while Emily explained how it worked. The simple joy on his face reminded me of myself at that age, watching Fred work on engines. "Mom and Dad still won't talk about you," Lisa continued. "But I thought maybe—" She trailed off, looking lost. I touched the photograph I kept in my shirt pocket. A different shot of Fred and Grandma dancing by the jukebox, not the one I'd placed in his casket. I'd found this one while sorting through his old albums, tucked between the pages of a vinyl sleeve like a bookmark from another time. What was I supposed to say to the sister who had helped bleed me dry for years, who had taken and taken until there was nothing left, who had called me selfish for following my dream? As Elvis started playing from the jukebox, Tyler's selection, I took a deep breath and wondered what Fred would do. Lisa stood in front of me, the weight of our broken relationship hanging in the air between us. The jukebox played Elvis in the background while Tyler fed it quarters with the enthusiasm only a 10-year-old can muster. Emily kept him occupied, glancing over occasionally to make sure I was okay. "You created something amazing here," Lisa finally said, gesturing around the diner. "I was blind, Jack. Too wrapped up in my own problems to see what you were trying to do." I said nothing, remembering all the years of being her emergency fund, her safety net Her ATM. Tyler hasn't stopped talking about his famous uncle since he saw you on TV, she continued, her voice growing smaller. He made me drive 2 hours to get here, just to see the place. I asked, my first words to her in nearly a year. Lisa shook her head. To see you. He misses you. And she looked down at her hands. I miss you too. I looked over at my nephew, now sitting at the counter while Emily showed him how to make a proper chocolate malt. What happened with the Jeep? I asked, noticing she'd arrived in an older Honda, not the shiny new Grand Cherokee she bought with Fred's inheritance. Had to sell it, she admitted. Couldn't afford the insurance and gas on a waitress's salary, especially after Dad lost his job. This old Honda was all I could get with what was left. That was news. What happened? Company downsized. Mom's working double shifts at the nursing home now. They're struggling. The old Jack would have immediately offered money. The new Jack waited. I'm not here to ask for anything, Lisa said quickly, reading my expression. I just wanted Tyler to see you. And I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. Her voice broke on the last word, and I saw my sister, really saw her, for the first time in years. Not as the favored child or the entitled taker, but as someone who was barely treading water, just like I had been for so long. Uncle Jack. Tyler called from across the diner. Aunt Emily's showing me how to make milkshakes. She says I can have a job here when I'm 16. Emily shrugged apologetically at me over his head. Aunt Emily was new, but I found I didn't mind it. I turned back to Lisa. You guys eaten dinner yet? She shook her head, relief washing over her face. I led her to a booth and brought over 3 specialty burgers and malts. Tyler joined us, talking a mile a minute about how I was basically Tony Stark, rebuilding this place from nothing. You're like a superhero, Uncle Jack, he said between bites. Dad never builds anything. He just plays games on his phone. Lisa winced, but didn't correct him. I gathered things weren't great with her ex. After they'd eaten, I gave them a tour of the motel and the restored gas station. Tyler's eyes grew wider with each room. When I showed him Fred's truck, carefully preserved in a special garage on the property, he ran his hand over the hood with unexpected reverence. Grandpa Fred was always nice to me, he said quietly. He showed me how to change a tire once. Dad said it was stupid to learn that stuff. Lisa looked away, embarrassed. I realized that Tyler might have more Fred in him than I thought. As they were leaving, I made a decision. Lisa, I'll help Tyler with college when the time comes. But I'm not going to be an ATM for the family anymore. She nodded, understanding completely. That's more than fair. We hugged briefly, awkwardly, the first steps on a long road to rebuilding trust. That night, I told Emily about Lisa's situation and my offer regarding Tyler's education. I'm proud of you, she said, taking my hand across our small kitchen table. Fred would be too. The thought warmed me from the inside. Maybe the old man had been watching out for all of us in his own way. The memory stop success continued to grow, but Emily and I were already dreaming bigger. During a weekend drive, we discovered an abandoned drive-in theater about 150 miles down Route 66. Weeds grew through the cracked concrete. The projection booth had been vandalized, and the massive screen had holes in it. But the property was huge, 12 acres with a perfect view of the sunset. We could restore it, Emily said, eyes bright with possibility. Show classic movies. Have theme nights. It was crazy. We were still getting our feet under us with the memory stop. Taking on another massive renovation project was risky. Fred would say go for it. I said, already mentally calculating costs. We opened a memory reel drive-in, showing double features of classic American films. Our opening weekend featured Dirty Dancing and Back to the Future, with every parking spot filled and cars lined up on the highway trying to get in. For years flew by faster than I could have imagined. Tyler, now 14 and shooting up like a weed, started working weekends during the summer. We taught him how to make proper popcorn with real butter and how to troubleshoot the ancient speaker boxes we'd lovingly restored. Lisa came to visit often with her new boyfriend, a mechanic with a quiet manner who seemed to genuinely like her for who she was, not what she could give him. My parents didn't come. Some wounds take longer to heal, if they ever do, but I'd sent them tickets anyway, leaving the door open a crack. With two successful businesses running along Route 66, Emily and I were busier than ever. But one night, as we closed up the diner after a particularly hectic day, she pulled me into the center of the empty floor. "Marry me," she said simply. I blinked, surprised not by the question, but by who was asking it. Shouldn't I be the one asking that? She laughed. "Since when have we done anything the traditional way? Besides, I'm tired of correcting customers who call me Mrs. Thompson." 2 months later, we held the wedding at the Memory Stop. The diner was transformed with twinkle lights and vintage decorations. Emily wore a 1950s style dress that made her look like Marilyn Monroe, while I kept it simple with dark jeans and a leather jacket. Our families and friends gathered among the booths and along the counter. Tyler was the ring bearer, proudly carrying the bands on a little red cushion while delivering ice-cold bottles of Coca-Cola to guests. "This is way better than TikTok," he kept telling anyone who would listen. The jukebox played Twist and Shout for our first dance, and soon everyone joined in, the wooden floor creaking under the weight of so much joy. Malcolm had created a wedding feast that perfectly blended 1960s classics with modern touches. His fried chicken alone was worth getting married for. During the reception, Lisa approached with her boyfriend. "Mom and Dad send their love," she said tentatively. "Dad's too proud to come, but he watches all your videos. He has opinions about how you restored the gas pumps." I laughed, imagining my critical father secretly following my TikTok account. Tell him I'll take any advice he wants to give. I'm still learning. It wasn't perfect reconciliation, but it was something, a start. As the night went on and I danced with various guests, I found myself in the center of the floor with Malcolm's cousin, who ran a dance studio in Oklahoma City. "Jack, you dance like you've got two left feet that are both asleep," she said with professional dismay. I grinned, spinning her around with more enthusiasm than skill. If anyone complains about my dancing, I'll remind them I saved Route 66. That buys me some grace on the dance floor. Life settled into a rhythm after the wedding. We split our time between the Memory Stop and the memory reel, hiring good managers to keep things running when we couldn't be in both places. We turned our little house into a proper home, with a nursery painted sky blue and cloud white. Emily insisted it was gender neutral enough for whatever might come. What came was Ella Rose Thompson, born in our 6th year of running the Memory Stop. 7 pounds, 3 ounces of perfection with Emily's eyes and, according to several nurses, my stubborn chin. She arrived 9 months to the day after our wedding, punctual and loud, announcing her presence to the world with a cry that could have drowned out a semi-truck's horn. In the quiet of our hospital room, Emily cradled Ella while I sat beside them, overwhelmed by a love I hadn't known was possible. I placed Fred's record player on the windowsill and put on his favorite Elvis album, "Love Me Tender," played softly as the three of us formed our new family. "Grandpa didn't leave me money," I whispered to Ella as she wrapped her tiny fingers around my thumb. "He left me a soul, and now I'm passing it to you." Back home, we settled into new routines. Midnight feedings replaced our late nights at the diner. Diaper changes became more common than oil changes. The Memory Stop added a baby corner, where parents could sit with their little ones in a quieter section of the diner. On Ella's first birthday, we brought her to the Memory Stop for a small celebration. Malcolm baked a special smash cake just for her, and she lived up to the concept, getting more frosting in her hair than in her mouth. Tyler, now 16 and getting his learner's permit, hovered over her like a protective big brother. "I'm going to teach her all about cars when she's bigger," he announced. Uncle Jack's already showing me how engines work. Lisa watched him with a mixture of pride and amusement. He's saving up for auto repair school now. No more video game money. I caught her eye and nodded my approval. Some cycles could be broken after all. People often ask me how I did it, how I took a rusted-out gas station and turned it into a thriving business that revitalized a forgotten stretch of Route 66. They want to know the secret, the business strategy, the marketing plan. The truth is simpler and more complicated than that. I tell them what I once told Emily on a quiet night in the diner. People think I saved Route 66, but Route 66 saved me. Both statements are true. The Mother Road gave me purpose when I'd lost everything else. It connected me to Fred and to something larger than myself, the great American story of movement, of seeking, of finding home in unexpected places. Route 66 isn't just asphalt and roadside attractions. It's a living memory, a shared experience that spans generations. When an elderly couple comes into the memory stop and tells me they honeymooned along this road 60 years ago, they're not just sharing a story. They're keeping a piece of America alive. That's what Fred understood. That's what he tried to teach me. That's what I hope to pass on to Ella. These days, I often take her for drives in Fred's old truck. She sits securely in her car seat, watching the world go by through the window, tiny hand reaching for the steering wheel. Sometimes I swear I can see Fred in the rearview mirror, nodding his approval. The memory stop has been featured in travel magazines, TV shows, and documentaries. We've had visitors from all 50 states and 32 countries. There's a 6-month waiting list for the motel rooms. We could expand, build more, grow bigger, but that would miss the point. Fred's gas station was special because it was small, personal, a place where every customer was remembered. We're keeping it that way, even if it means turning people away sometimes. Quality over quantity. Soul over scale. Fred's principles still guide us. Lisa and her boyfriend got married last spring in a simple ceremony at the courthouse. Tyler stood as best man, proud in his first suit. They're building something real now, something honest. She works at the memory reel 3 days a week, managing the concession stand with unexpected skill. Turns out she has a head for business when she's not trying to survive on handouts. My parents finally visited last Christmas. The reunion was quiet, a bit stiff, but genuine. Dad spent an hour examining the gas pumps, pointing out minor flaws in my restoration technique. Coming from him, that was practically a bear hug. Mom held Ella and cried, then pulled me aside to say she was sorry. After nearly 7 years of estrangement, it was a start. As for Emily and me, we're talking about another restoration project, an old bowling alley in a nearby town that's been closed for decades. The vintage lanes and original pin setters are still there, hidden beneath years of dust and neglect. It would be our biggest challenge yet. We're crazy to even consider it. Emily said as we toured the building last week, Ella balanced on my hip. Completely insane, I agreed, already mentally calculating renovation costs. We looked at each other and smiled. We'll probably do it. Every night before bed, I play one of Fred's records for Ella. She's too young to understand the music, but she seems to feel it, bouncing and swaying in that uncoordinated way of toddlers. Emily jokes that she inherited my dancing skills. Sometimes, in the quiet moments after Ella's asleep, Emily and I sit on the porch of our little house, watching the cars pass on Route 66, headlights cutting through the darkness. We don't always need to talk. We've learned the value of shared silence. We built something good, didn't we? Emily asked on one such night. We're still building, I answered, taking her hand. That's the thing about memories. They're never really finished. They grow and change with each retelling. Each new person who becomes part of the story. The memory stop isn't just preserving the past. It's creating new memories every day. Every time someone laughs at the memory stop, I hear Fred's voice. Memories live on as long as we cherish them. And Route 66? She'll never die as long as there are dreamers willing to pull over, get their hands dirty, and remember what matters.